Do you notice anything wrong with this guttering? Well, Emma, that's quite the hairline crack you've got going on there. I'm just messing with you. I cut this in half last week because I installed my large water butt. I realised it was a bit too big for my front garden, so I installed it in my back garden. And I now have my little green one. But to make this little water butt work, I need to redirect my guttering. I'm going to take this apart and see if I can make use of these bits. As you can see, the current guttering isn't actually very secure in there. So when I put it back together, I'm going to add some glue. I wanted to give you a proper introduction, but every single time I tried to record this video, a massive lorry would drive by. Honestly, all the cars that were driving past, people probably thought, why is this woman so angry? Look how mad I am. I look like I'm going to start a fight. Let me show you what I mean. In this video, I'm going to show you how to redirect your guttering into an open top water barrel like this. And it didn't get any better. Before I do that, I'm going to get a coat on because it's absolutely freezing out here. Before I do that, I'm going to show you... Anyway, that's enough of my filming disasters. But you know how much I love to share with you the realities of creating content and doing DIY. So let me tell you what I'm actually going to do here. I'm going to take all of these pieces apart. This piece is actually longer at the bottom, so I'm going to move that up. Add some corner pieces to direct it around the corner. Add another piece of pipe and then angle it so that it goes into the top of there. That shorter piece is probably the right length to direct it into the water butt. So I'm going to take that out of there and I'm actually going to use the longer piece directly into the top. I'm going to need a few things, including a saw. You don't need an electric saw for this, it could just be a hand saw, but since I have an electric saw, I'm going to use it. And these are a couple of corner pieces that I picked up a couple of weeks ago. This one is angled to make sure the pipe is angled down and not at 90 degrees because the water would just pool inside the pipes. That'll become clearer a little bit later on in the video. It turned out to be remarkably fiddly to take out. I realised I was going to need to get my screwdriver for the top bit, and this bottom bit was super yucky. I only needed to take one screw out because all I want to be able to do is just pop the pipe out. I'm happy with the positioning of this clip, so I'm going to leave it in. This part had been previously glued together and because of that was quite tricky to take apart. I tried a few different methods, wiggling, pushing, grabbing, tried to bang it on the floor a little bit, before I tried the good old-fashioned wedge it in between your feet. And that worked a treat. I started by giving the ends a straight edge so that they would be easier to plug and play into the other parts. I positioned it into place to work out how long I wanted this top bit to be. So I started to mess around with the tubes to see what fit. It's important that the pipes are angled down, otherwise the water will just stay in the pipes and get clogged up. I tried a few different solutions actually. Some people might be able to just visualise in their head what works, but I sometimes find it's easier just to try different solutions to see what works. I realised that the top pipe would need to be about a foot shorter, so I cut it down to size and I checked that it fit. I should say that I'm actually relatively new to guttering, and what I'm creating here is just based on a bit of guidance that I've had online. So it's entirely possible that you yourself might have come up with a completely different solution, perhaps even a better one. And I'd love to hear about it. How would you solve this redirection problem? I started by cleaning inside of the tubes because they were absolutely filthy. Believe it or not, that's after I cleaned it. Some of that is just stained on. To glue them together, I decided to use this window and door sealant. The main reason being, it's what I had in the house at the time. And if you're wondering why I'm gluing it together at all, these different parts just fit together so loosely that it just falls apart, even when it's securely clipped into the wall. I put a ring of sealant around the top and then slotted the next part in. I didn't realise that you wouldn't be able to see this, but I actually just used some masking tape to keep the two parts of the pipe together whilst it dries. Oh, I fib, I did manage to catch it on video. So here's my weird pipe monstrosity. I started to glue the various parts together. I did have to take off a tiny bit of the previous glue from where it was stuck together in one place before. And I decided that I would leave this part to dry. And this is where I confess that I actually did parts of this yesterday. So I was already able to come back today to find the dried piece. I came back out this morning to say good morning to my monstrosity guttering. I discovered that the piece that I had masking taped into place had fully dried, and I was able to remove the tape with some difficulty because I'm not quite tall enough. As I tried to position it into place, I realised that it wasn't really stuck together very well. I thought I might be able to glue the last bit in and prop it up with a stick, whilst I worked out where in the wall I wanted the second clip to be secured. So this was the plan, but that's not how it turned out. I realised that the sealant wasn't completely dry, even though it had a full 24 hours. And I realised it probably just wasn't quite the right product for this application. Even though it does stick to itself and it does stick to surfaces, it wasn't really strong enough for what I was using it for. I also had another problem, which is that this is a bit wonky. And this made me realise that I'm going to need to put a little bit of pipe just here, in between the downward join and the 90-degree join, which will make the pipe look straight on the front of the house. I decided to leave it there for today because I was exhausted. So the plot thickens for this guttering. I guess I'll have another crack at it tomorrow. A big part of what I was doing today was actually working on the finance and accounting side of my business. So this is hot off the press, but you are now looking at DIY with Emma Limited. I'm now a limited company. This is very exciting for me. And I want to tell you why this is so exciting for me through a little short story. So when I was about 10 years old, I took a bucket from underneath the sink in my parents' house. I took a sponge and I walked around some streets that were just a little distance from my house. The fancy streets that had cars in their driveway. My house didn't have a car in the driveway because it had no driveway. And I would target these houses and I would go and knock on the door at 10 years old. My parents had no idea where I was. And I would knock on the door and I would say, "Would you like your car washed? And you can pay me however much you think is reasonable based upon how well you think I've done." And the reason that I let them tell me how much they should pay me is because I didn't know how much to charge. How much do adults pay to have their cars washed? I had no idea because I was 10. And I started to wash people's cars and they started to give me money. And it used to vary between 20 pence, 50 pence for doing the car to like a couple of quid. And I realised that it would take quite a long time to do one. So I asked my friend one day if she wanted to come with me whilst I washed cars. And so again, we would go into the sink, I'd grab my bucket, and we'd go to the local streets and asked if they wanted their cars washed. And since I came up with the idea, I thought probably I should get more money and that I'll give her like a little bit less because it was my idea. I came up with it. And so 25 years later, to be an entrepreneur who has finally got a limited company, I just, I have always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Ever since probably since I was 10, but I first heard the word when I was 13. I heard it in a class at school and I raised my hand and I said, "Miss, what does this mean?" We were in like a careers class and we'd all been assigned different jobs and I was this thing called an entrepreneur. Truthfully, I felt like I've been an entrepreneur ever since I started DIY with Emma, but there's something about this that feels significant and I'm really excited about it. I'm so glad that I can share it with you. But yeah, if you want to know what happens with the guttering, subscribe.